Welcome to step number 3 of the partial sewing hairstyle using Mrs. Rutter's hair extensions from mrsrutters.com. In this step, I'm going to be focused on teaching you step by step how to sew in your hair extensions. Okay, so in this step, I'm going to be focused on teaching you how to sew in your hair extensions. The extensions I will be using are Mrs. Rutter's hair extensions from mrsrutters.com. Also, I'm going to be using 4 bundles of hair in total, and those lengths are 20 inches, 22 inches, 24 inches, and 26 inches. All of my hair bundles have been dyed the color black because the hair comes in a natural brown color, and I like for my extensions to be a very dark black color. So if you want to learn how to dye your extensions the color black, make sure to visit howtoblackhair.com to watch that hair dye tutorial. So when we're beginning, I want you to know that in order to make sure that your hair is gradually reaching the longer lengths, you have to start with the longer lengths at the very back and then work your way towards the shorter lengths up top. So that means you will sew your 26 inches in the back, and then you will next go to 24 inches, 22 inches, and then 20 inches at the very top, so that all the lengths gradually go down into layers. Now, as well, when you're starting with your first extension being sewn onto your head, you want to make sure that you measure your extension to go from this point here all the way around to your head to this point. You're going to measure that out, and then you're going to cut your extension length, and this is going to be your 26 inches if you're using the same inches as mine. If not, use your longest length first because you have to work from the longest length up to the shortest length. Now, the reason why you want to measure your longest length around the entire perimeter of your head is because when you're wearing a partial sew-in and you want the ability of wearing it in a sew-in, you have to make sure that you have one fluid track extension going around your perimeter. So that way when you lift it up, you don't have multiple extensions starting on your edges causing it not to be flat. So now what I'm going to do is measure out my 26 inches, and then I'm going to begin stitching it down to show you how that process is done. Okay, so right now, as you can see, I've pretty much sewn down my entire perimeter track except for the very last point there on the right side of my head. Now, the reason why I've done this is because the entire process is very repetitive. You're going to do the same steps over and over and over again, and I'm going to briefly explain those steps to you because they're very, very easy. So when you start, you want to make sure to secure the beginning of your extension right here at the point of your braid 2 times. This is just going to ensure that it's not going anywhere and it's very secure at this point. Then what you're going to do is you're going to continue to do 1 stitch at a time, going all the way around the entire edge of your head, all the way around to this point. Now, every time you make a stitch, you want to make sure that the track is positioned literally right against your scalp. The reason why is because you want it to lay very flat to your head. If you sew it on top of your braid, it's going to be lifted from your scalp and it's not going to be as flat as possible. That's why you want to have the extension laying directly on your scalp as you make each knot. So that way when you wear your hair up into a ponytail, it's extremely flat. No lumps, no bumps at all. So when you straighten out your leave out and wear it into a high ponytail, it's going to look like real hair. It's not going to have any issues whatsoever. So now I'm just going to finish showing you how the process was done, which means I'm going to keep making 1 knot at a time, and then when I reach the very end, which is at this point, I'm going to create 2 knots to secure. Now, if you do happen to have just a little bit of weft left over, which is perfectly fine, all you have to do is secure your last 2 knots and then trim the little bit of weft that's left. You don't want weft hanging over because when you're combing out your hair and blending your leave out, it won't look right if you have too much hair hanging off. So just make sure your last stitch is perfectly where you want it to end. Make 2 stitches there and then trim off the rest if necessary. So now that I have my needle ready, what I'm going to do is begin sewing. So when you're sewing, it doesn't matter if you go under the track or over the track. What I like to do is go through the net, under my braid, and then under the track to create a knot. The whole point, no matter if you go this way or if you go this way, is to make sure that every time you make a knot, the track is flat against your scalp. That's the whole purpose of doing this. So now with my needle and thread attached, I'm gonna go through my weaving net, underneath my braid, and also underneath the weft. And you're gonna do the same knotting technique, which means you're gonna go around the needle twice and you're gonna pull through. Now when you pull through, make sure that you're placing your extension on your scalp, so that way when you create the knot, it's flat against your scalp and not on top of your braids. So continue making your knots, and then once you reach the very end, secure with 2 knots. Make sure it's pressed flat against your scalp, and then secure the knot. So now I'm at the point where I'm at the very end, and I'm going to secure 2 knots right at that point, then trim off the excess you see here. So now at this point, what you want to do is go ahead and make the knot a little bit tighter, cut it off, and then cut off the string, and then cut off your excess weft. So here we are at the point where I'm almost done installing all of my extensions. I have one last final row to sew in, and I'm going to show you exactly how that's done, because the way you're going to see me do it is the way you're going to be sewing your extensions throughout your entire head. Previously, I left off on showing you how to sew in your perimeter track, so that way you can have the ability to wear your hair up into a ponytail without it being any lumps or bumps with your look. Now, when you're sewing in the rest of your extensions, you got to do so in a U-shaped fashion. So that means you're going to start at the very back of your head with the longest length, and you're going to make sure to sew it in a U shape. And then you're going to do the flip over, which I will teach you. You're going to seal down that flip over with 2 knots, and you're going to continue to do your U-shaped pattern, going back and forth, back and forth. So you go from your 26 inch to your 24, 22, on up to 20. As you reach closer to the top, your U is going to get a little bit more tighter, a little bit more tighter. So that way it's a tight U at the very top of your head, and it's going to give you the ability to be able to blend your leave out with it. So when you're sewing, the U is kind of slanted in the back, and as you're working your way up to the top, you're going to make sure that it's just getting a little bit tighter, so if it's perfectly tied, you want it to look. So what I'm going to do is show you how to stitch down your very last extension, how to do the fold over method, and then how to finish off your look. So here we are at the very top of my head, and what I'm going to be doing is showing you how you want to sew your extensions and implement the fold over method to finish your install. So as I've stated before, you're going to do the same techniques that I'm going to be showing you throughout the entire process of your head. Also, additionally, when you're sewing it down and doing your fold over, at the point where your fold is, you want to make sure you secure that point with 2 knots, and then you want to follow up going through here by doing 1 knot at a time. Also, the fold over is very important when you're doing your install, because it's going to prevent you from having to cut through the weft of your extensions. Because every time you cut through the weft of your extensions, that increases your chances of hair shedding. So to prevent that, you can do the fold over method throughout your entire head without having to cut through your weft. So now that you understand that, I'm going to begin sewing to show you how the process is done. So with my needle and thread still intact, you want to make sure to go under your weft, through the net, and then come back out through the net, and then create your knot. So now we're right here near the point where the fold over happens, and you just want to do one last final stitch all the way through your braid there. And then once you do that, you're going to fold the track back over. So now we flip your hair up. And then you want to make sure that the fold is nice and flat where you want it to be. Make 2 stitches there, and then continue making your stitches throughout your extension. So you're going to go underneath all the wefts, which means you're going through 2 of them because it's a fold. You're going to go underneath your braid, pull through, create your knot. So now do that once more. And then continue finishing your install.
Just to recap, this step was all about teaching you how to sew in your hair extensions. Be sure that the first track you sew around the perimeter of your head is done, so that way you have the ability to wear your hair up into a ponytail with a very flat and neat look. For the rest of the extensions, always start with the longest length in the back and work your way up to the top of your head with the shortest length of hair. So now that you've sewn in your hair extensions, in the very next step, step number 4, I'm going to be teaching you how to straighten your hair extensions as well as how to straighten your leave out to blend with your look.